Thank you very much for supporting our center, our activities. You know that we are people from economy, sociology, psychology. We want to study good leadership and inform practice about how to build better organizations. You've had many experiences with leadership, both as a follower and as a leader yourself. You've been trained in the US Army. You are half German, half American. You've got your education from the US Army. You worked in the IT business for the past 25 years. You've been a director at Dell.
Yes.
And for the last few years you've been working for a Japanese company, Hitachi Data Systems, as a general manager. And so you both had experiences as a follower.
Yes.
During your time as a student in the army.
Yes.
At Dell before you became a manager there. But now you are in a leadership position yourself, and you are studying leadership. So you
Yes.
founded that Beyond Leadership movement. We are interested about your personal experiences. So the first question always is, how important is leadership? Do we need leaders?
Mm-hmm.
Do you need a leader to get up in the morning, to write your books, to...
Well, I think what we need is inspiration and motivation for just about anything we do in life. Usually, we do the things we do best, we do for love, not for money. So it's never really a commercial question. So I think in a lot of environments, especially in big organizations, leadership helps people find that inspiration to go do great things. Sometimes we find it ourselves, sometimes we find it at home, but sometimes it's really important to find it at the job and at the work that we're in. And that's where we need leaders that can help shape the future in a good way.
Mm-hmm. And that's how you would define good leadership? Providing this inspiration and motivating people, is that good leadership?
Well, it's an element of good leadership. I think it's an important foundation. You know, one of the things that I've always said is the foundation for change is sometimes inspiration. You know, to do things differently is part of what makes humanity what it is. We do things differently. At some point we invented fire, and we did things differently after that, right? So I think one element is the inspiration. Another element are of course shaping organizations and shaping the purpose of what we do. That's something leaders can have a big influence on based on their situation and based on the position that they're in. So I think for good leadership, and I'd say it's more important to talk about great leadership, or in German we would say gütige Führung, and not just gute Führung. That difference is important. In modern society, we've forgotten some of the things that make us great. We need to get back to that, and that's what makes great leadership.
Mm-hmm. Do you think anyone can become a good leader in these terms? Can we learn to become a good leader or even a great leader, or do people have to have it in them?
Well, I think everybody has the opportunity to be a great leader. I think it's in everybody, irregardless of where you're from, which culture you're from, male or female, which religion you follow. I think every person in the world has the potential to be a leader. It can be a moment in time. It can be a moment of crisis where somebody who's never been a leader takes the lead, jumps in the water and saves someone's life and becomes a hero. But I think the potential is always there. It's not something you have to learn. I think it's something you have to discover and something you have to fördere and fordere so that it comes to fruition. But the potential is in everybody.
How do you lead personally?
That's a good question. Those of us that lead well usually don't know how we do that. So we struggle with that question sometimes. But over the last 5 years, as I've invested more time around Beyond Leadership, I've invested time in trying to understand the difference between good leadership and great leadership. And because of that, I think I've found some of the elements that can make the difference. And for me, it has a lot to do with the heart, with the emotions, with regard, respect, and trust. And I think those elements are what differentiates between good methodical leadership but great inspirational leadership. It's all about the emotions, it's about the values, and it's about belief systems, and it's about being able to communicate those and utilize those whenever you interact with the people around you. And I think that's what makes the difference.
So let's put that in more practical terms. Have you been to the office this morning? Is there anything you actually do that you think makes you a good leader? Are you particular? So you are saying what we need as good leaders is to be passionate, help people
Yes.
commit to a vision, and so how do you do that? What do you do with the people around you?
Yes. The how is sometimes the hardest question. The why is the easiest. Why do you do it? You do it because you care. You do it because it's important. You do it because you have a purpose. You do it because it has reward for you in one form or another. The how has a lot to do with people. It's connecting with people. When I walk into the office, the first thing is I go around and say hello to everybody. I shake everybody's hand. There's some of the people that want to hug. We hug the first thing we see each other. So there's a lot of personal interaction of walking around, talking to people, being with people. That can be customers, that can be suppliers and partners, but more so than anything, it's the employees. It's the people in the company that I spend a lot of time with and interact with. And that's where I think I make the difference. That personal connection that some of us, as we grow up, get taught not to connect personally, always be objective and never be subjective. Well, I'm subjective all the time, I'm personal all the time, I'm very, very close to the people all the time, and I think that makes a big difference.
And do you think that influenced by your American heritage or background, are you a different leader from other people you know because of your American background compared to other German?
Yes, I think, Rolf, there's an element of that. I think I am the way I am because of where I come from. So I have the combination of the Germanic, and sometimes I stress the manic part of Germanic, right? The Germanic piece and the American piece as I grew up. And I believe the values of those two cultures are in all cultures. It's the same everywhere in the world that we go. But I learned a certain combination. I learned how to keep my Deutsche Tugenden of being focused on detail, structured. I need Ordnung. If I don't get Ordnung, I feel uncomfortable, right? Process orientation, those types of Germanic traits are in me. But on the other side, I've got the American pieces, the Begeisterungsfähigkeit, really being able to be excited and engaged about something we would want to do. I have the pieces in regards to creativity, allowing mistakes to be made so that we can have more space and room for innovation. I have some of the American pieces around the charisma and the way to communicate with people that I've been able to combine. And I think the magic is when you start to combine the best of the different worlds. The combination is what makes it better, and each of us have that potential, whether we're from Germany or from America or from Japan or from Vietnam. My wife is from Vietnam. We all have that same opportunity to combine pieces of the different cultures that we've met, and that combination is part of what makes great leadership.
Who has inspired you to become the person you are now, and do you have a role model, or did you encounter teachers or leaders who practice what you now preach? Or?
Oh, absolutely. My first inspiration in my life was always my father. Mm-hmm. My father was a drill sergeant and a sergeant major in the United States Army. Mm-hmm. So it was always yes sir, no sir, everything you say sir. So I grew up with that environment, and he trained the next generation of leaders in the military. That was one of his roles for about 10 years of his career, of the 30 years he was in the military. And that was all about honor and integrity and process and quality and comradeship and teamwork. All those military aspects that I grew up with are also elements in most business environments later in life. So my father was an inspiration for me. As I grew up later, I ran into leaders in business, or I read about leaders. One of my greatest inspirations is Douglas McGregor, who wrote a great book, 1960, The Human Side of Enterprise, the X Factor and the Y Factor. That influenced me later in life, after I had been leading in business, to understand some of the differences more consciously about how people are motivated and how we should go about great leadership. But what he did, what Douglas did in the 50s and 60s is something that now Daniel Goleman does in Stanford on emotional intelligence, on the physiological aspect, not the psychological aspect as Douglas did. And I think those combinations today are becoming the newest school of thought on leadership. Is no longer just psychology or just physiology or just economics. It's exactly what you guys are doing here in Frankfurt, is combining all the different schools of thought into a cross-functional, cross-departmental view of what the best combination is. And I'm probably a human experiment of the best combination, because I grew up in those different cultures, and then I worked at 10 different companies from 4 different cultures in the last 30 years. And I think that combination will be the answer to the 21st century challenge, but we can no longer utilize 20th century approaches to the 21st century challenge. So we need that combination.
I perfectly agree, but why don't we see it so often, or the opposite? Why do we experience bad leadership so often? Why do leaders still commit to McGregor's theory X and think people have to be controlled and monitored all the time, and they're inherently lazy, and with the effects that people are demotivated, that we have a lot of absenteeism and burnout and these problems in the workplace? Why is that?
Yeah, and that's a big question. And I think there's a lot of schools of thought around the world that have asked that question since 1960. Why hasn't that been implemented in a manner in real life business? Because of the logics associated with how we look at it. And every experiment you do will verify and validate that. So it's an important question, and I don't think there's a single answer yet on it. But I believe a big part of the systematic process since the Tayloristic times of how the Industrial Revolution came about, a big part of how big companies work today is based on centralized command and control systems. And those are anchored in the days of Taylorism. And because of that, a lot of the mechanisms around the manager force him to revert to a type, as Douglas McGregor would say, which is the X type of leadership, because the systems around you force you into that corner sometimes. A lot of managers break out of that into the Y type, open leadership that entrust and empower the employees to really go their own path with a lot of trust, because they're self-motivated, right? And that happens because people believe in their own values stronger than the systematic system around them. The reason the Mittelstand is so successful in Germany is because the systematic environment is much smaller and much flatter, that allows that type of leadership, or the Y leadership, to be more prevalent. Especially those environments where still the family and the people that have a love for what they do, they love their employees, so they're very close together. That allows more of the Y-type leadership to happen. I think we've got a system issue, a global system issue now, that has actually become more extreme in the last 4 or 5 years because of the mechanisms of the 20th century command and control encountering the realities of the 21st century multipolar global business. And you see that in some of the political environments in Africa and other places where that centralized tyranny of control has failed miserably because of the new systems of communication and openness on the social media side that have changed the way the political systems have to work. Well, guess what? We had that in business for a long time. We have to encounter that reality, and we have to change the systems. It's not the people that's the issue, it's the systems that they're working in.
Okay, but some people might argue that at least for some organizations, like the military, for example, you need that clear structure, you need clear hierarchies, etc. Would you agree that the type of leadership that you would have in mind working best is probably not suited for every organization the same? Or?
Well, I would argue against that point. And actually some of the biggest proponents of McGregor's theories on the Y side were generals and admirals in the military, in the United States military at the time. You know, being people-driven and people-oriented doesn't mean you're not structured, doesn't mean you're not clear, doesn't mean you're not quick in regards to decisions and making things happen. That's what the military is known for. You have to decide quickly, you have to move quickly, you need clear structures, a great infrastructure, great logistics, and you have to move fast and be very agile. That is not counter to one another. So you can have the methodical side of clarity and transparency and clear lines of communication, and I call it direction, but you can have a very strong element of people-oriented enablement and empowerment, very self-motivated structures around that so that you can do both. And I think that's at the core of all the learnings after Douglas McGregor. It's all about the combination of one element with the other element. And what makes military leaders, the good ones, so successful is because they care so much about the people in their organization. They know if we make mistakes as leaders, people will die. And in a military environment, it's not like in sports or business where you would want to win 21-20 and you still win, right? No, you want to win 21-0. You want no casualties on your side. You don't want to write letters home saying that your husband or your wife, we lost them because of mistakes we made in the field, in the organization, in the strategy, in the way we lead, right? So I think if we look at it more deeply, and I grew up in the military, there where you care the most, you will have the most success. If you care and add the analytical and method strength to execute, you actually have the best of both worlds. And I think that's the future of great leadership, is combining that in the best possible manner. And maybe an additional answer, that will be different situation by situation by situation, yes, but it will have both.
Okay. I mean, what you are describing is also, I think, the modern latest research on, say, transformational leadership. So leaders need to both be able to work with transactions, paying people and rewarding or punishing people for good or bad performance, and on top of that, be considerate, provide a vision, etc. Now, you can obviously also care for the wrong cause. So which role do values play for deciding which actually is really good leadership or not? I mean, we see so many leaders of the banks at the moment during the financial crisis that have been good leaders because their banks have made large profits.
Yes.
But obviously, whether they're really good leaders is at least
a very
question.
Very relevant question, especially the last 3 years, 5 years maybe. You know, I call it the phase of extreme capitalism. You know, we've gone very far on the capitalistic principles of shareholder value and doing anything it takes to maximize that principle. And I think it went the wrong way. I think most of the world would say it went the wrong way. But the question really gets back to the point of, you know, what's underlying all these systems that really makes the difference. And I'm with you. The methods on the one side, the processes on the one side, and then the emotional leadership on the other side, emotional intelligence. What everyone forgets is what's underneath that. We don't talk about that so often. We talk about transformational energy. We talk about organizational energy. I was just in St. Gallen recently with Heike Bruch and talked a little bit about those pieces. I think what we forget is underneath that we talk values, and underneath that we talk beliefs. And we neglect those two layers of organizational and transformational process. And because we neglect those layers, we get into problems a lot faster, because when you neglect something, you don't talk about it. When you don't talk about it, it's not a conscious element of your leadership structure, your leadership culture, and your leadership style. So what I believe is that the underlying base element is what I call is belief. It's believing in yourself as a leader, believing in your team, and believing in the purpose. If you don't believe in it, you may not know what it is. If you've got the wrong purpose, everything you do afterwards, it will be going along the wrong path, right? So I think it's really important as a leader to get back to the basics of what are the fundamental beliefs that bind the organization together. It starts with yourself. it extends into the team and the organization, and it has a lot to do with the purpose. Only after that can you start talking about values. What are the values that connect all of the people in the organization together that are bound to those beliefs, right? And those values, the buzzwords are integrity and sincerity and honesty and openness. We say that a lot, but do we actually do it in every day and in every interaction that we have? So I think those two pieces, Rolf, you're very right. They're so fundamental, but they're so neglected in the discussions we have and the agendas that we have that they actually need a lot more attention now, and they're the foundation of all the rest of the transformative and energy processes associated with modern leadership.
Do you do something personally at Hitachi to bring that mission or purpose about in every person you lead? Is there systematic activities like retreats or things where you talk about these underlying elements?
Absolutely. I think one of the keyest pieces of what makes Hitachi who we are and what has made the success of the German organization for the last 3 years so successful is exactly that cultural value and belief piece. And the reason it works at Hitachi is because the founder of Hitachi 101 years ago, Odaira-san, he set certain foundational layers that have remained the same for 101 years, for 400,000 people. There's no holding structures in place. There's no legal entities in place. It's thousands of individual companies around the world with 400,000 people, but we all have the same view on that culture and those foundational pieces, and they're very simple. He basically said, we're going to focus on technological innovation for the good of society. Very base rule, very base statement. He said, secondly, it's more important to do good than to focus on revenue and profit. That's not very extreme capitalistic, I would say, right? But it's an extremely important value because those two founding principles have stayed the same for 101 years. And on top of those, we always talk about the three values of the company: wa, makoto, and kaitakusha seishin. Japanese words. Va, I live in Berlin. The Berliners know what va means, right? But va is the respect and the trust and the harmony as a baseline of everything we do. Makoto is sincerity, honesty, integrity, and openness in everything we do. And kaitakusha seishin is pioneering spirit and questioning everything that we do. So it's an interesting combination. But the answer to your question is yes, at Hitachi we do it in everything that we communicate. Every screensaver on the computer has it. Every USB stick has the values on it. When I speak to customers, most of the time, and actually every single session, we're talking about these beliefs and values of Hitachi and how they compare to our customers before we ever talk about the product. That happens rarely in my business. I'm in the IT industry, very fast-moving industry. Everyone wants to sell very quickly, dominated by American companies on a quarterly cycle. They rarely, in a sales meeting with a customer, are going to talk about values that are 100 years old. They're not going to do that. They're going to talk about the product and how fast it is and how good it is. Ask what the price is going to be, make it very cheap, and close the deal right now because it's the end of my quarter. I need the money quickly because I need shareholder value, right? That's very different at Hitachi. And we've been able to have that discussion with the employees with those values. And we do it with our partners and we do it with our customers every day. So it's part of what we do and who we are.
Super. Thank you very much, Patrick. That was very interesting.
Thank you, Rolf. Appreciate it.